And I'm Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times.
And I'm Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. National Lampoon's Vacation is a goofy comedy travelogue about everything, just about everything that can go wrong when a family from Chicago travels west to the California fun park that the film calls Wally World. And Chevy Chase stars as dear young dad who wants to get a few more miles in before calling it a night.
Well, up and at 'em. We're here.
That's one way to find a parking spot, but that scene would have been better, I think, if they had kept that mood music, that Mr. Blue quiet music, instead of going to the jazz music.
Yeah, because the soundtrack music lets you know the movie knows what's happening. It would have been funnier with the
just
with the
quiet with all the disaster going on. Now, this film is a no-brainer, to be sure, but the writers have come up with enough jokes like that one that ring true, and enough jokes that are so ridiculous, including one very sick joke about one of their maiden aunts who takes the trip on top of their car. Well, I think the whole thing works. And Chevy Chase has finally found a picture in which he can lean back and not force himself upon us. That's because the writing is so good. I like taking this vacation.
I like the first half of the movie better than the second half. At the beginning of the film, when they go to buy the station wagon, and it's got the 8 headlights on it, you know, kind of the Bruce McCall special.
Right.
I thought this is going to be like all that great National Lampoon stuff that just pushes American consumerism right over the edge. Then in the last half of the picture, I thought they got so involved in resolving the plot that it was just like an Ozzie and Harriet.
You're talking about when they actually get to the amusement park?
How they get there, what happens.
The beginning is better. I still think that this has enough funny bits that I think that people who, after having suffered all this summer with vacations, I think they'll have a good laugh at the film. I did.
16 Candles is a sweet, funny new comedy that begins with a big turning point in the life of a teenage girl, her 16th birthday, and everything's going to be different after today, right? Not right. She's totally grossed out when everybody forgets her birthday. Not her stupid parents, they don't remember it. Her stupid sister, she doesn't remember it. Nobody remembers it. And there's no magic either on this great day. She feels just as insecure and inadequate today as when she was 15, yesterday. And her day doesn't get any better. Here's a scene from that evening at a high school dance. The girl played by Molly Ringwald has a crush on a good-looking senior boy, but who asked her to dance? A freshman known as the Geek. That's Anthony Michael Hall as the Geek. Later on, he tries to make a pass at her in the shop classroom.
Would it be totally off the wall if I asked if I could have sex with you?
You know, you asking me is not as off the wall as where I won't.
BD?
No. I'm sort of saving myself.
What's interesting about that scene is the basic choice that it makes. It starts out with him making a big pass at her and she shoves him away, but then instead of developing into a sleazy sex scene like something out of Porky's, this movie shows those two kids as insecure and vulnerable and able to be friends with each other, and that's the whole movie. That's the whole movie is like that. Instead of going for cheap laughs, it spends a lot of time observing exactly how a teenage girl sees the world and how the world sees her. At the end of the movie, you've laughed a lot, but this is interesting. You're not ashamed of what you laughed at. 16 Candles remembers what it was like to be young and serious and very romantic.
I'll tell you this, I think it's an excellent film, and I think you have some good criticisms. It has a very accurate sense in detail about the physical things of being a kid. His T-shirt was out when he was dancing. The T-shirt, I mean, his shirt was out. He thought that was cool or neat, and obviously it's sloppy, he looks like a jerk. But it has that sense. It also has the interior detail, which is that every kid, even the most popular ones, are insecure. If you're a teenager, you're insecure. I don't care how successful you are, and it has that sense too. It's a very fine picture.
When you look at the character named the Geek there, Anthony Michael Hall, he's not the kind of geek that you'd see in Porky's, you know, where he's got zits all over and thick glasses like I wear. You know, I think I was a geek when I was a freshman in high school. I'll tell you something else. Every freshman kid thinks he's a geek, and so this movie understands you don't have to be weird. You just have to share the general feeling of being an outsider and being insecure. This movie knows about
Here's
that.
a difference also between Porky's, and that is that the director of this film, John Hughes, writer-director, likes every one of his characters. I don't think the people that made Porky's or its many rip-offs like teenagers. This guy likes teenagers, and it shows through the fine filmmaking.
One footnote, this movie is not merely positive and wholesome in the way we've said, but it's also funny and entertaining. We don't want to make it sound so holy that nobody will go see it.
Okay, I don't.
The Breakfast Club tells the story of 5 teenage troublemakers who have to spend all day Saturday in detention. They get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, which is why they're called the Breakfast Club. The movie stars 5 of the most talented and promising newcomers in Hollywood today. Judd Nelson plays the tough teenage rebel. Amelia Estevez from Repo Man plays the jock, the high school wrestler. Molly Ringwald from 16 Candles plays the social butterfly. Ali Sheedy from War Games is the neurotic girl who doesn't talk to anyone. And Anthony Michael Hall, he was the nerd in 16 Candles. This time he plays the class brain. When the day starts out, these kids have nothing in common, but after a while they begin to open up, to talk, and to share their secrets with each other.
What is it? Parents?
Yeah.
What did they do to you?
They ignore me.
They all agree on one thing: the teacher is the enemy.
Naked lady says.
And you, I will not be made a fool of.
There's a lot of talk in this movie. It all takes place in one room, a giant library, where various combinations of the kids pair off and go off in the corner and talk and confess and break down and fight and finally get to a little bit of the truth about themselves. It's kind of serious, it's sort of heavy going, but it's interesting to see a teenage movie that takes its characters seriously, and I give Breakfast Club 3 stars. I'm Roger Ebert.
It's called Weird Science, and for a lot of people, I think it's one of the most eagerly awaited films of the summer movie season, the late summer movie season, for 2 reasons. First, it was written and directed by John Hughes, who has made 2 very good films involving kids recently, 16 Candles and then more recently, The Breakfast Club. And the other reason, at least that I've been looking forward so much to Weird Science, is its premise, which is that 2 kids managed to create, like modern Dr. Frankenstein's, a perfectly beautiful woman who will answer their every command. Sexist it may be, but it's still a cute idea.
What would you little maniacs like to do first?
And I think that every little maniac in the movie-going world would have an answer to that question. That's Kelly LeBrock as the perfect woman, and this is the 2nd time she has played that role, in effect. She also starred as the dream girl, you remember, in the perfectly awful The Woman in Red. And I'm very sad to say this, but Weird Science doesn't turn out to be much better. I was stunned, actually, by how little was done with its engaging premise. How little was done that was either imaginative or funny or surprising. The film winds up insulting women and our intelligence with an awful lot of foul-mouthed toilet humor. One of the few modestly amusing scenes occurs when that perfect woman takes one of the boys to a swinging party and has to ask his parents for permission.
Party. You know, there's going to be sex, drugs, rock and roll, chips, dips, chains, whips. You know, your basic high school orgy type of thing.
Chips, dips, whips, your basic high school orgy. Not very funny. Now, when we get to the party, the film really falls into the dumper with violence and ugliness and stupidity. And even the character of the perfect woman, and boy, you could do a lot with that character changes because she turns out to have really a mind of her own. She's not just the boy's creation. She wants to teach the boys a lesson about life. This is sort of like little tacked on redeeming social value on a porno film. Weird Science is a weird movie. It's a good idea, but badly treated by a previously thoughtful, entertaining filmmaker. Caught me totally by surprise.
You're going way overboard on this one, Gene. This is a funny movie, and it is an entertaining movie. I don't know where you get this about toilet humor, violence.
Let me tell you where.
I mean, I think you're really way too sensitive.
First of all, I like foul-mouthed humor. The Last Detail is one of the foulest films ever created, and it was funny. So I'm now no prude on that. But I'm telling you that the character of Anthony Michael Hall, the kid...
a wonderful performance.
No, I think he had a wonderful performance. He does the same thing over and over again, Roger, and that is...
Gee, that's funny. You liked him in
I did like him in
16 Candles when he played the wimp.
Yeah, he had a script. Here he has one toilet joke after another. If you took out every anal reference... If you took out every anal reference, I'm going up on your shoulder.
I know, I'm pushing you away.
Okay.
Just cool it down.
Yeah. If you took every single one of those out, he'd have a supporting role, not a starring role.
That happens to be the way he talks. It happens to be the way some high school kids talk. This movie is funny. The scene where they invent, when they program the computer is funny. The scene where the woman appears is funny. The way she talks to them is funny.
That's the first 5 minutes of the movie.
One of the things that Hughes knows in this movie, and he knows in all of his movies, is how high school kids think. And of course, you said it was sexist. I guess it is sexist. Some high school kids are sexist. They have this woman. What do they do with her? I think it was fabulous that she turned out to have a mind of her own and that she tries to help them grow up instead of simply being a Playboy centerfold.
No, I think it would have
That's
been
very interesting.
I think it would have been more fun, frankly, if it had gotten out of control with their and they had learned the lesson on their own without her turning the character. But Roger, this script is full of it goes to toilet humor.
You're sounding like the Parents Committee.
No, I'm not like the
Yes,
Parents
you
Committee.
are.
I like the howling when it came to vampire films, and I like all kinds of crazy teenage films. And this one is
I mean, your
garbage.
credentials are terrific, but you missed the boat on this one.
Pretty in Pink is the latest film from the pen, or maybe the word processor, of John Hughes, who has given us such funny and sensitive films as 16 Candles and The Breakfast Club. But then there was last year's terribly disappointing Weird Science, and sad to say now, another flimsy film, Pretty in Pink, detailing the problems of a poor girl who feels rejected, and she is rejected by the many wealthy kids who dominate her high school. The story gets rolling after one of the rich kids does ask her for a date. But her loyal, puppy dog-like friend, who also is an outcast, tells her that she's being a traitor to their cause by considering the date. Molly Ringwald plays poor Andy, stuck now between an old friend and a new flame.
Blaine? His name is Blaine? Oh, that's a major appliance. That's not a name.
Just because I'm going out with Blaine doesn't mean I can't be friends with you. I mean, it doesn't change the way I feel about you.
Oh, that's very nice. I'm glad. Here's the point, Andy. I'm not particularly concerned with whether or not you like me. Because I live to like you, and I can't like you anymore.
His name's Blaine.
One of the toughest things to accept in the movie is the fine character actor Harry Dean Stanton as her father. No resemblance at all between them, but he does offer some good advice.
Richie, it's kind of stupid. It's just his family has a lot of money.
Oh, well, is that a problem? I mean, you like him, he likes you. It's worth it.
Is it?
And they live happily ever after? No way. Not after Blaine is persuaded by his friends to reject the poor girl and not take her to the prom.
You have the guts to tell me the truth. Just say it.
I'm not lying.
Tell me.
What?
Tell me.
What do you want to hear?
Just tell me.
What?
You're ashamed to be seen with
No,
me.
I am
You're
not.
ashamed to go out with me. You're afraid.
Now that's a sad scene to watch because Molly Ringwald is acting her heart out there and she's very appealing, but all in the service of what really is a dumb movie. The story is so predictable. Off again, on again relationship. And John Cryer, who we saw in the first scene, who plays Ducky, usually her lapdog friend doing kind of goofy little things, is truly annoying in a one-note performance played, I think, much too loudly. And as for the portrayal of the rich wasps in this film, you saw one of them hiding there in the little hallway with his little jacket and shirt. That portrayal is as racist as some black men are saying lately the color purple is. I think that Molly Ringwald is a wonderful young actress, but she is totally wasted, in my opinion, in Pretty in Pink.
I like this movie. I thought that its heart was in the right place. I like John Cryer's performance as Ducky because I felt he was a case study for the same kind of kid I was in high school, the class clown. You know, the pretty girl won't go out with you because you're the captain of the football team. You talk her into going out with you. And I found that this movie was so accurate in being able to remember how those sorts of things went on.
But Roger, I know about being the class clown because I was one of those too.
I imagine you were.
Yeah, but Roger, that's why we're both in the same job, oddly enough. But I'll tell you this, I was never over at the girl's house every single day lying on her bed going crazy. The class clown hangs back a lot farther.
This is the class...
Now, come on, you didn't do that either. You didn't do that either, and I know you do it because you would say now if you did it.
This is 1986, and people hang out together a little bit more than they did in 1956.
Not like that.
I felt that the whole story of this movie, sure, it's predictable. She wants to go out with a guy.
Real predictable.
He's stuck up, then he asks her out, then he doesn't ask her out. That's what goes on in high school.
Roger,
this whole business.
you know
I think more hearts are broken over the senior prom than anything else that happens.
There's no question, but here's the way to play that. We've seen dozens of senior prom movies. This thing offers nothing fresh, just as you're saying, lots of senior prom movies. I would have had this woman reject the rich guy and go back to her own culture and say, you rich people,
okay,
you
I got news for you, Gene. That would have been just as predictable. It would have just simply been a different ending.
Different ending and unpredictable.
Really great. You ought to get your own word processor. Next
I do have one.
I was very disappointed about Hughes in this film called Ferris Bueller's Day Off because I've been a fan of writer-director Hughes and the lead actor of this film, Matthew Broderick, for a long time. The story would be simple enough to do well. It's the story of a bright, aggressive kid who decides to ditch school and have one great day with some friends and particularly help out his best male friend. Part of the style of the film is that Broderick looks directly into the camera and talks to us a lot. Now, that's a very bold move in the movies, usually reserved for the very funny words of someone like Woody Allen. But Matthew Broderick has nothing special to say when he looks us straight in the eye.
I do have a test today. It's on European socialism. I mean, really, what's the point? I'm not European. I don't plan on being European. So who gives a crap if they're socialists? They could be fascist anarchists. It still wouldn't change the fact that I don't own a car.
So much for the history of men. Anyway, Ferris grabs his best pal and girlfriend, and their lark includes lunch in a fancy restaurant. That wasn't very exciting. Later, at a German-American Day parade in downtown Chicago, Ferris gets the whole town rocking to something other than a famous German-American song. That scene didn't thrill me, and I live in Chicago. This picture, which is a tribute to Chicago, which is also writer-director John Hughes' hometown, is not as fresh or as funny or as energetic as another Chicago tribute movie, The Blues Brothers. And frankly, that's because Ferris Bueller doesn't do anything much fun. The fancy restaurant scene is a weak imitation of the one in Beverly Hills Cop. The way Ferris fools his principal in ditching school is ridiculous low comedy involving the principal getting bitten by a dog and stepping into mud. Nothing special happens when the kids go to a ball game, and they don't even sit in the bleachers where all the kids love to sit when they go to Cubs games. How bad is this film? The most interesting characters are developed right at the end of this picture. A little romance develops between Ferris's mean sister, Jennifer Grey, who's kind of cute, and a troublemaking kid played by Charlie Sheen. I would have followed them in the movie, but that's too little, too late.
You know, they say never take an expert to see a movie because he won't be able to see the forest for the trees. I think you're so eager to find little flaws in the picture's view of Chicago that you're not looking at the movie. I mean, I don't think it matters whether they get the best seats at Wrigley Field or not. This is a sweet, inoffensive, heartwarming little movie about a kid who's trying to help his friend win some self-respect. And on that basis, I think it works, and I thought it was sort of entertaining.
But Roger, I point out some little mistakes, but I point out very big mistakes, which is the whole sections of comedy, limp of comedy involving the school principal. I mean, I don't think you were laughing at any of that stuff. And the other thing is this whole mentioning of helping his friend, that is just snuck in at the end. And I think that most of the picture is about Ferris fooling his parents, fooling the teacher. If you put a clock on it, most of it is about that fooling.
I think
this film needs to be redirected and edited.
I think you can kind of see, if you watch the film attentively, that generally speaking, Ferris Bueller has a bigger plan in that day than just simply skipping school. As for the principal, I agree, it was slapstick. The actor, Jeffrey Jones, incidentally, who played the Emperor in Amadeus, gives a real good job, though, of being an interesting school dean, and I thought his performance was interesting, even though they gave him nothing
They gave him nothing to do, and I'll tell you, the sister is the real star of the film.
We're going to get into real stars. How about Mia Sara, who plays Matthew Broderick's girlfriend, and who is one of the loveliest and freshest actresses I've seen in a long time.
And like many members of this cast, in my opinion, given absolutely nothing interesting to do.
Okay, well, I'm not saying it's a great movie, but I'm recommending it, and you're absolutely not. So.
You got it.
Our next movie is named Some Kind of Wonderful, and it tells the story of a teenage outsider, a young artist who comes from the wrong side of the tracks and has a hopeless crush on the most popular girl in school. The kid is played by Eric Stoltz. He was the deformed child in Mask, and so this is the first film he's made since then. His best buddy is a tomboy played by Mary Stuart Masterson. Neither one of them fit into the high school in crowd. Of course, Stoltz doesn't realize, they never do in these movies, that the tomboy who advises him on the mysteries of women is secretly in love with him. Not even in this cute scene where she gives him lessons on how to kiss.
Close your eyes. Lesson's over. You're cool.
She also gives him some heartfelt advice that he doesn't have a chance of scoring with the popular girl.
She doesn't love you. It's a joke. It's all a joke.
How do you know?
I bet my hands on it.
They have a nice relationship in this film. Finally, though, comes the big night. Stoltz has a date with the girl of his dreams, played by Leah Thompson. Now, what's interesting about this situation is that this is not a movie about how he gets the date, although that's in there, but it's really about whether he should get the date. The bottom line is he should be true to himself and not get obsessed with a girl just because everybody else is. Some Kind of Wonderful is another thoughtful comedy about values from the workshop of John Hughes, the man who specializes in films about teenagers. He produced, Howard Deutsch directed. What's intriguing about this movie is that the characters in it are concerned about growing up right, making good decisions, learning more about themselves, and that actually makes them a lot more mature than most of the adults in today's Hollywood movies.
I liked some of the performances. I thought that the story was obvious because, as you said at the very beginning of your review, they never realize that the one who really likes them, they consider the old friend, is the one that they should really like. And so that bothered me. And it also bothered me because this Mary Stuart Masterson, I think, is a superb young actress who will be a big star someday, and I think that this guy should have been attracted to her. I think she's so much more attractive in the film than Leah Thompson that I think it's almost an unfair match, and so I find it implausible that he wouldn't see through that.
Gene, what would you, in other words, you would have the one that he winds up with be less attractive?
No, no, no. I am saying,
this is the same thing as in the Shore, remember the Shore thing?
It's also in that other film
where the best buddy is
like
Daphne
Lucas.
Zuniga.
It's like Lucas.
And he's in love with
yes.
the girl in California. He doesn't
yes.
realize this girl.
Yes.
Of course, the one that he eventually winds up with is supposed to be more attractive. That's the point.
No, what I'm saying is that he should have picked it up earlier because we pick it up earlier. She doesn't. They don't do a good job of making her seem like a tomboy because she's such an exciting presence. She busts through the camera.
That's part of the fun. Is that tension as we're waiting for him to.
There's no tension when you can figure it out that early. Steve Martin and John Candy are two of the funniest men, period, on movies, on TV, guest appearances, concerts, whatever. And often when you team a couple of big stars, there is no magic. They're almost afraid of engaging each other. But in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, there is a little magic with these two men, with Candy and Martin playing a couple of very different businessmen who meet accidentally and repeatedly because of follow-ups and traveling from New York to Chicago. A snowstorm forces their plane to land in Wichita, where they end up sharing a bed together.
Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. Those aren't pillows.
Now, Martin, a fastidious marketing executive, is forever trying to lose Candy, a sloppy, less uptight shower curtain ring salesman. And in St. Louis, Candy comes to Martin's rescue, even though he doesn't really want him to.
What are you doing? I almost crushed your head like a melon.
Well, now it's on the road again, and it's one disaster after another. But this car crash scene you're going to see is a little different as we get inside the heads of these two guys when they finally figure out they are going the wrong way on an expressway.
You're going to kill somebody!
That fingernail bit is an absolute classic, and actually in the movie that I saw, that sequence is even funnier because these two guys view each other just before the moment of doom, apparently, as one is the devil and one is a skeleton death head. And I don't know why the film company took that out in the scene that they're releasing to us, but they're not playing fair with their own movie. Those scenes and the title, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, might suggest that this is just one long chase picture. But it's better than that in the moments when Candy and Martin exchange emotions, which come as a surprise in an action picture, especially when Martin realizes that Candy's simple but considerable strengths are in his character and not necessarily in the way he dresses. I wish that director John Hughes had included more of those tender moments. It would have made it an even better picture. Still, I vote thumbs up because John Candy has been given his best role to date in the movies, and he's equal to it. Steve Martin, of course, he's good.
I thought it had about the right balance between the tender moments and the action moments. I think you need both. And I enjoyed the fact that there are times in this movie when, for example, when Steve Martin starts telling John Candy, you don't know how to tell an anecdote. Your anecdotes have no point.
Right.
They have no interest.
I know.
I would rather spend 3 days in an insurance seminar than sit next to you on the bus. And,
right.
and he goes on and on and on. It plays against Candy's face.
Right.
And the face is just sadder
sad,
and sad.
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
You know. And that's good comedy because it's comedy that has truth in it. And I enjoyed this movie a whole lot.
Don't you agree this is that we've been complaining that Candy hasn't been given a role or he's picked wrong roles, whatever? Finally, John Candy hits one.
Right out of the park. The movie is named She's Having a Baby, and it's the new movie by John Hughes, who has charted the emotional lives of American teenagers in a whole series of movies, including 16 Candles, The Breakfast Club, and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Hughes's characters have gradually been growing older over the years, and this time when we meet them, they've graduated from college and are getting married. And right from the first, Hughes mixes realism with fantasy and satire in this movie, as in the opening wedding scene.
Both I'll try to remember the little things that mean so much, like flowers on her anniversary, a kind word when she's had a rough day.
The newlyweds are played there by Kevin Bacon and Elizabeth McGovern, and before long they've settled into a suburban existence where Bacon, who has dreams of someday writing a great book but now works in an ad agency, gets restless at the neighborhood small talk.
How can you not know what kind of mower you got? You got a big Yard King 410. Remember that?
Yard King 410. 410 is for I like the old 380.
You're out of your mind. The grass catcher on the 410 has a third more capacity than the 380. That alone makes it a better unit.
It doesn't matter.
When the couple has trouble conceiving, Bacon tries to hide from his wife as she grows obsessed with doing everything just right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's been 48 hours since our last coition. My temperature's optimum. I'm ovulating. I have the pillow set up in the position Dr. Stanky wants us to try. You can watch TV if you get bored.
And that love scene develops into perhaps the only copulation scene I've ever seen in the movies that scored to the song Working on a Chain Gang.
Right.
I really like the underlying story in She's Having a Baby. I like the parts about the relationship and moving into a new home and the scenes of pregnancy and childbirth, the feeling of parenthood at the end. But unfortunately, those scenes were swamped in the film by all sorts of satirical and fantasy scenes that came right off the wall and distracted from the real underlying story. There's a cleverly choreographed musical ballet number, for example, that involves all the neighbors and their lawnmowers, but neither that scene nor a lot of the other fantasy scenes really add anything at all to the story. In his previous films, John Hughes has shown a real gift for showing everyday characters in believable situations, and I hope that the gimmicks in this movie are only an experiment.
Well, this is sort of interesting. I didn't care for the movie much, and actually I appreciated that he's tried to step out and take a shot at the gimmicks, which I'm sure you wouldn't quarrel with. I just thought that they went on a little bit too long. For example, you refer to the everyone out there with the lawnmowers. That's done at such a length that it becomes aggravating. In other words, I think that those quick dialogue things that we heard with the minister in the church, that was kind of exciting because it came fast and quick. And did I hear that? Which is exactly what's going on with the character's mind. The rest of the movie, to me, seemed rather predictable. These are the issues that young people deal with, and he offered, for me, he offered nothing new. McGovern was interesting. The other guy was not.
Of course, Kevin Bacon. I mean, after all, when people get married and move into a house and the woman gets pregnant and they have a baby, that's predictable in a sense. I mean, a lot of people do that. The point is it shown in an interesting way? And I felt that, for example, the moment when she's in labor in the delivery room and he's waiting and he's worried, the moments leading up to that and after that, really good, strong stuff, but needed to be in a movie that didn't suddenly, every once in a while, turn into a Fellini-esque TV commercial.
Well, obviously, we have a problem with the way the picture was put together. I just think even the original material wasn't that good.
Two thumbs down.
You got it. Called The Great Outdoors, a family vacation comedy triggered undoubtedly by the success of Chevy Chase's two big hit National Lampoon vacation films. But The Great Outdoors isn't even in that class. It's even more disappointing considering it stars Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, two big talents. There are very few moments worthy of either of their talents. Candy plays a regular family guy from Chicago who takes his clan to a vacation in Wisconsin's North Woods, and after Candy and his wife check into their cabin, they get romantic, but in walks an uninvited guest, his obnoxious rich brother-in-law, Dan Aykroyd.
Or it could be Smokey's cousin Horny.
Will you do something with this?
I'll do whatever you want.
Anybody home?
That's a dumb party joke not worthy of Dan Aykroyd. The two men have differing views about nature. This is a case of a businessman versus the average Joe.
Look around you, Roman, for God's sakes. This is beautiful country here. Take a good look.
I'll tell you what I see when I look out there, if you want to know.
Yeah, I'm curious.
I see the underdeveloped resources of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan. I see a syndicated development consortium exploiting over $1.5 billion in forest products.
More than half of the movie is given over to lame hijinks, physical hijinks, especially ones involving Candy and a bear. You can spot this one coming.
Big bear!
Big bear!
No! True! Out there!
We're glad you're home, honey.
Big bear, chase me!
Now look closely at the bear. Look down at the bottom of the frame. You can see the trainer's stick actually hitting the bear to make him growl.
Uncle! Ah!
Listen, if that were the only technical mistake in the film, I still might like the picture. This picture stinks all the way through. Candy and Aykroyd are marvelous talent. Aykroyd has shown in past pictures that he's a better talent than Candy, who succeeded only for the first time last year with Steve Martin in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. He fails when he's used as just an overweight wind-up toy, which has been his sad state in his career for far too long. It happens again here in The Great Outdoors. It's very disappointing. Aykroyd has a couple of throwaway lines that are funny, but that's it for what is a very, very weak film.
I was shocked. You would think that with the names Aykroyd and Candy connected to a movie, you would have something funny, even if you only just shot a documentary of the two of them sitting around during their lunch break.
That's my standard line.
They threw away that stuff and just used whatever they had left. Now, this movie was written and produced by John Hughes, who also made Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which is about another odd couple, Candy and Steve Martin, who go through a lot of adventures. It's almost as if he put all of his good stuff in that movie and then took all of the outtakes and put them in this movie, outtakes of his script, because this movie is lame and dumb and slow and no good.
And didn't you know everything that was going to happen?
I was
Isn't that amazing? The big commodities guy from Chicago just doesn't like nature. And then the average guy, the happy-go-lucky chubby guy, he loves animals. Thanks.
This movie is named Uncle Buck, and it stars John Candy as a character similar to the one he played in that wonderful 1987 comedy named Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Both movies directed by the same man, John Hughes. In this one, Candy is a large, shabby, unemployed, good-hearted bachelor, kind of lonely, and when his brother calls and asks a favor, he's happy to agree. The brother and sister-in-law have got to leave town on a family emergency, they tell him, and they need somebody to babysit with their 3 kids. Well, not surprisingly, the kids aren't too thrilled with their new authority figure, and they give Candy a hard time right from the first morning.
You put onions in the eggs.
I'm gonna go check on Maisie. I'll fix you some cereal when I get back.
The most scornful of the kids is the 15-year-old, played by Gene Kelly. She's humiliated by everything about Candy, especially his car.
What time do you want me to pick you up after school?
Don't bother, I'll get a ride with friends.
Eventually, Candy is able to bring the smaller kids around. They're fascinated by his approach.
Did you brush your teeth?
Yeah, I could even feel my toothbrush.
You know, I have a friend who works at the crime lab at the police station.
As I mentioned, Uncle Buck was written and directed by John Hughes, who has made about 10 movies involving young people and family life in the Chicago suburbs. His titles include The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Ferris, Bueller's Day Off. Uncle Buck is on the same familiar turf, but there's something a little strange about the film. It wants to be funny and warm-hearted, but at the same time, it has a dark undercurrent, and there are scenes where the kindly uncle goes after the teenager's boyfriend with a power drill and then locks him in a car trunk and tapes his hands together with construction tape. It's strange the way this movie generates creepy feelings that work against everything it's trying to do. By the end of the movie, I wasn't sure that I would want Uncle Buck living in my suburb with me if I lived in the suburbs.
Well, actually, I like the darker material more than the sweet, predictable namby-pamby stuff. I mean, to have the kids suddenly be transformed by Uncle Buck into being better mannered, and to have Uncle Buck become transformed by the kids into being willing to finally propose marriage to Amy Madigan, that's nothing special.
Yeah, I mean, you could see that coming a long way down the road.
That's TV sitcom. Yeah. I like the dark stuff. You know, things like that movie Neighbors and stuff like that. I mean, I like the dark quality in the suburbs. If the film had been more consistent in that way, with Uncle Buck being totally disruptive to the suburban environment, that would have been exciting.
I was thinking about Neighbors also when I looked at this movie, but the problem was there didn't seem to be, Hughes didn't seem to know which way he wanted to go, and so what you have is this upbeat kind of material with this undercurrent that seemed to be pulling against it. So both of it, I guess we agree that in one way or another the movie is
it's going in two
parts that don't fit.
Right. I have courage, and I love to see movies generally more dark than they are. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and unlike the other 2 films in this series, this one isn't even remotely funny. It also lacks enterprise. It's the only film in the series where the Griswold family doesn't go anywhere. They stay stuck in their suburban Chicago home, some vacation. Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo again play the Griswolds.
I don't know, Sparky. I just have this
feeling. Ellen, I want to have Christmas here in our house.
The joke here is that all sorts of weird relatives descend on the Griswold household, upsetting everything and everyone. After the in-laws show up, it's suddenly scuzzy cousin Randy Quaid and family.
We were gonna call, but Eddie wanted to make it a surprise.
Yeah. You surprised? Surprised, Eddie?
if I woke up tomorrow with my head sewn to the carpet, I wouldn't be more surprised than I am right now.
The humor is mostly slapstick, bad slapstick, as, for example, when Chevy Chase is locked in his attic by his mother-in-law.
Ooh. Oh.
I only laughed twice out of perhaps 100 attempts at humor in this picture, and one of them was when Chevy Chase lights up his house with Christmas lights. There are a lot of lights. In fact, it looks like the sun is in that neighborhood. But other than that, the humor is all of the nerdy in-law, nerdy neighbor variety. There's no comic energy in the story. The Griswolds can be funny when they go on vacation, but not here when they stay stuck at home.
Well, I probably laughed more than twice, and I would probably give it a better review than you would, but I can't recommend it. And it seemed to me that what we had here were all the elements, and they just weren't quite firing. For example, when the in-laws turn up, they're not very funny, and they're not really differentiated, and they're not really made very interesting.
They're just standard joke in-laws, I mean.
Yeah, in other words, nothing is really done with them. And the whole business of how he gets trapped in the attic, you can see how that could lead to a whole series of physical gags, but really, they don't quite pay off. And over in the movie, I kept thinking, gosh, it's here. If they just give it that extra push, maybe it's the director or...
Well, I'll tell you, the director
just couldn't quite get it over the top.
It's a first-time director who comes from making TV commercials, and he doesn't make the transition very well. In addition, I really didn't like the film and felt disappointed in it because they can be funny on vacation. Why not take them on a trip again? It works twice. Why keep them stuck at home in one location? I thought of Cannonball Run 2, where they didn't have the energy or the wherewithal to take the people on a real cross-country trip. Yeah. Why not take these people on a trip?
I'm not sure that's why they didn't go on vacation here, but I wish the movie had gone a little bit more somewhere than where it went.
That's little Macaulay Culkin left alone in his suburban home when his family leaves him behind for a Christmas holiday in Paris. And that's the premise of the dopey new comedy, Home Alone. How does it all happen? Well, there's a lot of confusion when the big family, a couple of them have been combined for this trip, they all oversleep the morning they're supposed to go to the airport. Left alone in the big house, at first, the little boy tries to be a brave little man.
I can't seem to find my toothbrush, so I'll pick one up when I go out today. Other than that, I'm in good shape.
A more immediate problem, a couple of bungling burglars, Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, who have been casing the neighborhood for empty homes during the holidays. This is the first time Pesci has ever given a bad performance. It's a bad role.
It's loaded. It's got lots of top flight goods, stereos, VCRs, toys. Probably looking at some very fine jewelry, possible cash hoard, odd marketable securities.
The film also reaches for some obvious tenderness, giving the kid a creepy next-door neighbor who's rumored to be a mass murderer. But is he? They meet in church.
Well, this is the place to be if you're feeling bad about yourself.
It is?
I think so.
Are you feeling bad about yourself?
No. Of course, that old man is not a mass murderer, and I have a question, that whole scene about the little boy feeling bad about himself. He's obviously the most wonderful kid in the whole picture. The slapstick with the burglars in the picture, that's predictable. I could accept the premise of the whole film, I'll grant him that, but I just don't think a bright enough script was written with the kid being maybe more frightened than he would be and maybe even more clever. Writer-producer John Hughes and his director Chris Columbus have made a sort of a preteen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and the formula is wearing thin on me.
I think I would have liked the movie more if it had been much more realistic.
Yes,
what would really happen if a little kid were left home alone? And the whole business of the burglars trying to break in, and he contrives a very elaborate string of booby traps and trick ropes going here and there, and little fireworks that are going to go off and so forth to make life hard for them. These booby traps are nothing that any 8-year-old kid couldn't make if he had hundreds of thousands of dollars and the special effects department of a movie working for him. It's totally unrealistic. And because it goes into that weird subplot involving the burglars and the booby traps and so forth, it lost my interest. What would happen if an 8-year-old really were left home alone for 3 days? That would be a good movie.
And I was all excited because that, of course, was one of my, and I'm sure everyone else's, big fears. When your parents go out the first time and there's no babysitter, that is a big moment in every kid's life. And I thought this movie was going to tap into it, and instead we get slapstick and we get a phony thing with a mass murder.
It was directed by Chris Columbus and written and produced by John Hughes, who specializes in movies about kids and families and teenagers, and this time They really hit the jackpot. Almost every scene in the movie involves a previously little-known young actor named Macaulay Culkin, who was inadvertently left home alone when his large extended family and relatives all oversleep and raced to the airport without him. The movie follows his adventures as he copes by himself for a few days and even booby-traps his house to foil a couple of would-be thieves. For nearly 3 months, Home Alone has stood at the top of the box office charts, week after week after week, ahead of even such highly touted blockbusters as Godfather Part 3 and Kindergarten Cop, which also did very well, but not this well. Yet the movie didn't create much of a stir when it was released, except with the public, of course. I voted thumbs down on my review. Gene voted thumbs down on his review. Most critics could really care less about this film, arguing that the movie was too implausible to believe and that no little kid could actually do all of that stuff. I guess maybe that must have been like criticizing West Side Story because it had too much singing and dancing in it. It turned out that the audiences loved the whole package, including the implausibility. But there may also have been some deeper forces at work there. We're living in troubled times right now, and Home Alone offers the exact opposite of the headlines on the news. It's funny, it's lightweight, it's escapist, it's a fantasy, it's a comedy, it's about a little kid. It shows the kid using his ingenuity to outsmart the bad guys, and the audience seems to be thinking, if a kid could do it, why couldn't I? The implausibility is part of the fun. And to quote another ad about another movie, boy, do we need it now.
Well, I think that the secret has to do with they did tap into a common fear, and we both talked about that in our original reviews, which was being home alone is a frightening thing. I remember the first time I was left home alone without a babysitter, and I stood by the window most of the night just waiting for my family to come home. So that you start with that. What we both felt is that they didn't play it serious, and of course they didn't, much to their success. I just think that the reason, because I'm trying to explain how could we be so off, and if that's what we really are. And I think that maybe it has a lot to do with slapstick, which is such a special taste. In other words, you either buy somebody's idea of physical slapstick or you don't at all. And I didn't laugh at all during all of the stunts pulled out, and I understand that gets wall-to-wall laughs from kids in the audience and from adults.
Sooner or later, a book will be written on the cinema of John Hughes, who has had a lot of movies that we've liked very much, like The Breakfast Club and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yes.
And who takes a very simple idea every time. Look at Ferris Bueller's Day Off. A kid gets a day off from school. Right. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, 2 people trying to get home for Thanksgiving. Right. Breakfast Club, 4 kids stuck in detention after school. Right. Very simple idea that everybody can identify with, and then develops it in a way that is more or less accessible, and yet at the same time there's usually a little current of meaning in there. And this time he really did strike a nerve that he didn't strike for us, but all along it's interesting that he takes these typical, everyday, universal American experiences. He doesn't go for, it's not monsters, it's not Star Wars, it's just everyday stuff.
Yeah, he's, along with Spielberg, Vincent Canby called Spielberg the poet of suburbia. I guess he might be a lyricist or something. The other thing that was going on in the film was that Christmas subtext, and I think that's a very powerful thing. People hunger for a heartfelt Christmas movie, I think 12 months a year, actually. And the business with the neighbor next door, which I thought was so patently obvious, people bought it.
Maybe one other thing we ought to mention, Chris Columbus, the director, does a good job. I mean, this movie could have easily been very badly made, and it's not badly made.
It looks real pretty. Our next film is called Career Opportunities, and this one caught me by surprise. It's John Hughes' latest script since Home Alone, and this one could be called Working Alone, a surprisingly touching comedy about an older adolescent young man who has a lousy home life. He hates his parents. They don't particularly like him. He's known as the town liar. He can't hold a job, as his siblings are only too eager to point out.
You got canned again?
Well, he didn't get canned.
You got fired.
His last-ditch job is working as the night janitor in a department store where he's left alone. He goes nuts until he spots an unexpected visitor in the store who fell asleep there while shoplifting. That's Frank Whaley as the young man, Jennifer Connelly as the young woman, and soon they are hiding out in a dressing room from burglars who have broken into the store.
You're on top. They
Did you want to be on top?
Now, what I like about the film has nothing to do with those scenes. Rather, it has to do with the two original characters presented here. The young man who has low self-esteem, but a stable family, and the young woman who has no rapport with her parents, but all the self-esteem in the world. Together, they find a common ground of respect during this one enchanted night. Career Opportunities is not a great movie. It ends much too abruptly. But I like these characters, and I think they stand for a lot of troubled young people. Yeah.
To me, this movie was completely negligible. It was long at 80 minutes. The characters were absolutely without any interest at all, and that includes Jennifer Connelly, who was very beautiful to look at, and who was very good in that Dennis Hopper movie earlier last year. Frank Whaley, who was kind of a Eddie Bracken look-alike and kind of plays an Eddie Bracken character, seemed totally inexplicable in this film. I didn't understand where his personality was coming from, and every single thing that happens is completely manipulated, all about the burglars turning up, the cop and the father looking for the girl, the people who arrive and leave from the store and so forth. I just sat there in stunned disbelief at how completely lacking in any inspiration or interest this movie was from beginning to end.
Well, let me tell you about the character that this Frank Whaley plays, because I thought that was kind of, I'll tell you what I think he's about, and I think he's about what a lot of young kids are about. And that is, obviously, his parents and he are in conflict. That happens a lot in adolescence. But the kid feels, he's called a town liar. I mean, he feels like he's dirt. And here comes this, this is the last person in the world. He danced with her for 5 seconds one time when they were forced to switch partners in a dancing class in school, and this was a high moment for him. Suddenly, they're trapped alone. They only are the ones that they can rely on, each other. And he becomes a man.
Gene, you've described the plot, but I don't think anybody is going to go to this movie in order to get a nice little moral lesson about how the town moron suddenly gets a chance to go out with a pretty girl. I mean, this movie is apparently being sold as a comedy. It's not funny. It's being sold as a romance. It's not sexy. It's being sold as a thriller. It's not thrilling. There's nothing to recommend it except the fact that you learned a little lesson about human nature, you think, from this guy.
I didn't learn a lesson. What I did is I saw two characters grow up during the course of the film. I mean, I knew the lesson before I walked in, but it's the same kind of story that you see in American Graffiti with a nerdy guy and a bombshell girl. It's a classic teenage story, and I like it.
To use the words American Graffiti in the same sentence with Career Opportunities is, to me, utterly astonishing. That is John Candy there as a Chicago cop who still lives at home with his mother, and that was Maureen O'Hara in her first screen appearance in 20 years as his possessive, protective mom. And the movie is Only the Lonely, the story of a 38-year-old bachelor who is afraid to get married because he worries about his mother so much. The girl of his dreams works down the street in a funeral parlor. She's played by Ali Sheedy, and she's patient with Candy as he comes up with reasons why she might not want to go out with him.
You're going shopping. You have to babysit for your neighbor's kids, nieces, or nephews.
When Candy tells his mother he's dating this girl, it doesn't go over very well because she doesn't like anyone who isn't Irish.
She's Italian.
A guinea?
Oh, Ma.
Candy decides to take his mother and his girlfriend out to dinner, but that turns out to be a disaster. O'Hara and Sheedy, I think, are wonderful in this scene, enacting a very painful social moment.
Oh, that's a lovely dress you're wearing.
Isn't it?
Well, thank you. Even though it is a little big on top.
Ma.
Well, it is. You said so yourself.
Ma.
No, that's a problem I have. I'm not really that endowed on top.
No.
You're built like a 13-year-old boy.
Mom, would you please don't start.
It's a joke.
Only the Lonely was produced by John Hughes and written and directed by Chris Columbus, the same team who made Home Alone. I don't think this movie is going to do the same kind of box office business as Home Alone, but I liked it a lot more. I think it has a great deal of truth and insight in it, and that the three leading actors, Candy, O'Hara, and Sheedy, find the poignancy underneath the humor. I also like the fact that the movie made all the characters into recognizable human beings. Nobody, not even the mother, is made into a monster here. They're all people we've met before, and we can share their feelings. So I like this movie.
I think that the mother is made into a little bit of a monster, actually. I mean, I think that she's unrelentingly cruel and racist, and I thought that as you looked at Maureen O'Hara's eyes on screens, I watched her, and it was great to see her. I thought, she's smarter than that, and I thought that the mother could have been written with a little more balance here. I think they're onto a terrific story.
Don't you think that there are people exactly like that mother?
No, I think that there are people who are...
A lot of people?
No, I think there are people who are mean, but not comically mean. In other words, they're mean and kind of dull. And I think this is written comic and mean. I guess what I'm saying is I like the idea of this film a real lot. I looked at those actors and I thought if this film was written a little more intelligently and less as a cute comedy, I think it would have been a really fine film.
Our next movie is Dutch, which tells the story of a private war between a very angry young boy and a man who wants to be his friend. The movie stars Ed O'Neill, star of Married with Children on TV, as a guy named Dutch who's in love with the ex-wife of a millionaire. Her son is a spoiled rich kid filled with hostility, but Dutch figures he might be able to turn the kid around if he goes to pick him up at his private school and drive him home for Thanksgiving.
There's no better way for two guys to get to know each other than to spend a couple of days in a car.
That's Jo Beth Williams as the mother there. The kid, played by Ethan Randall, assaults Dutch with a golf club, but Dutch gets him to come along with him one way or another.
What do you like to do for fun? Well, you like to wiggle and grunt. Me too.
The movie turns into a formula picture where the two characters are somehow going to get to know one another while sharing adventures on the road. Among several phony scenes, this one is perhaps the phoniest.
Is that your most pathetic look?
This is my death to you look.
And, of course, they end up broken stranded along the way. In a movie like this, there's an unwritten law that you never call home for money. No, you have to rough it out. It's a real strange country out there when you get a movie like this written and produced by John Hughes. This bears a passing resemblance to Hughes's wonderful movie Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, which was also about an odd couple on the road home for Thanksgiving and all of their adventures and all of the reasons why they couldn't just pick up a phone and end the movie right then and there by getting some easily obtainable help. The movie has a lot of problems, but the basic one is it's not much fun to spend any time with this obnoxious kid who is presented as if the young William Buckley had been possessed by demons. That's not a criticism of young Ethan Randall, who plays the character all too well, but of Hughes' decision to make him so obnoxious for way too long before the inevitable smiles at the end of the picture. This was real tough going.
Oh, yeah, teeth are on edge during this picture. Now, you took care of the kid. Let me talk about Dutch.
Good old Dutch, yeah.
I wouldn't want to spend any time with Dutch. You know, a guy who comes on and says, you know, I'm working class, I'm a regular guy. I mean, as soon as he says that, I want to, okay.
What's wrong with the working class? I work for a living. You know, there are times during the movie when you're rooting for the kid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The kid at least has a fresh attitude. I mean, Dutch is just so sanctimonious about himself. Yeah. You know, and of course, the economic scheme of this whole picture is the richer you are, the more of a jerk you are. The poorer you are, you're practically sainthood.
Of course, the formula of a road picture like this is you have the obstreperous person and then the other one who is going to use reason and also force to make the first person human. Yeah. Now, you've got a problem with a movie like this. You don't know which of the two characters from scene to scene is which.
You don't like either one.
Curly Sue, and this is a cornball exercise in sentimental manipulation, but I don't care because it works.
What?
Sometimes, even when you think you know all the tricks, a movie will sneak up on you anyway. And at some point during Curly Sue, I honestly started really caring about these characters, maybe because the performances were so warm and convincing. The movie stars James Belushi as a drifter and Allison Porter as a junior league conwoman who's been traveling the highways with him. They support themselves with scams like this one where she gives him a bump on the head and he pretends that somebody's car ran into him. They pull their scam on a high-powered lawyer played by Kelly Lynch, and she falls for it. After soaking her for dinner, the two vagabonds hit the road again, although Curly Sue thinks they could have taken her for even more.
We wouldn't even be talking about this if you got some money out of that lady.
But their paths are destined to cross again. Curly Sue's big brown eyes melt the lawyer's heart, and she takes them into her home. Here's a nice quiet moment between the little orphan girl and the woman who has started to care for her.
All the stuff that happens to women, I already know.
Curly Sue was written and produced by John Hughes, who writes and/or produces about 4 movies a year, but this is the first film he has directed in 2 years, and I think it ranks with his best work like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yes, it's a simple and predictable story, but plot twists are not what this movie is about anyway. It's a heartwarming fantasy with a lot of warmth and a lot of humor, and to my surprise, I found myself caring about the characters and really getting involved in their story. And by the rude and annoying off-screen noises that you have been emitting, I take it that you do not agree.
I'm floored because I really have at least enough respect for you to think you wouldn't fall this.
You're the guy that liked the John Hughes movie about the two people trapped in the grocery store that even he didn't want to have released.
Okay.
So
career opportunity.
You've got a great track record.
I'll take career opportunities over this picture anytime. My problem was that I didn't like the little girl. I thought she was unctuous. There was no chemistry whatsoever between Belushi and Kelly Lynch. And you could
terrific chemistry.
And
during that piano solo?
No, let me tell you something. You can tell that even Director Hughes knew that there wasn't chemistry because on their concluding kiss, he shoots it from the back of his head. He realizes that if you see these two people in profile, that they don't even work together. I wanted to enjoy this picture, and I was surprised that John Hughes, who can do good work, and to compare this to Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, ridiculous. I don't even think you really believe that.
I really do believe that. Yes, I really do.
Okay.
And to give a thumbs up to career opportunities and then make that statement really undermines your position.
We're reviewing Curly Sue. Our next film is an entertaining kids comedy called Beethoven, involving a cute dog, cute kids, and some very funny parents. The funniest parent is played by Charles Grodin, a wonderful comic actor. Here is a dad who doesn't want his kids to have a pet, especially not a runaway St. Bernard that's only going to get bigger. Well, naturally, the kids prevail. The puppy is named Beethoven, and the dog loves Charles Grodin. Here it tries to save him from signing a business contract with a couple of shady characters.
And he's about to sign.
A more direct threat to Beethoven is an evil animal doctor played by Dean Jones, a nice casting choice given Jones's history of playing good guys in Disney comedies.
You hit me, I'll have you put in jail for assault and battery.
Some of the comic moments in Beethoven are predictable, but they're still funny, principally because of Grodin and his wife in the film, freshly played by newcomer Bonnie Hunt.
Well, she drives me crazy.
George?
Beethoven is a winning comedy because of the cute dog and the good casting. You have seen these situations before. 101 Dalmatians has lots of them, and it's a better film. But I did enjoy Beethoven nonetheless and recommend it for young audiences and for their parents.
Well, my problem was I'm not a young audience and I'm not a parent. And, you know, we usually don't say who we think will enjoy it, but I agree with you. Kids will probably like this movie. They'll like the dog, they'll like the kids in the film, they'll like the adventures that Beethoven is going through.
You like Charles Grodin?
I like Charles Grodin. I've liked him a lot more in other films that gave him a little bit more to do. And as I sat there, I was almost looking at it with two minds, because I found it very predictable and very much by the numbers, and yet at the same time I thought, if I hadn't seen that very many movies, and if I were 8 or 9 or 10 years old, I'd probably really enjoy it. So that's the call I have to make. It's not for me, and it really wasn't for you either. It was for that young audience and their kids that you're talking about.
Well, I didn't make a distinction here. I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm not saying here that my kids enjoyed it. I'm saying I enjoyed it. Okay. And I like the casting. The casting of Dean Jones is smart. Now, that isn't done for little kids. No. That's done for people like us who know the joke that's being played. It's Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and everyone I know who has seen this picture says pretty much the same thing, that it's essentially a carbon copy of the first film, and that was my reaction, too. Macaulay Culkin, who else again stars as Kevin, and the second time around, we can really appreciate his talent. He is impossibly cute, and he gives perfect little hesitant line readings as he realizes he and his family have jumped on separate planes for their Christmas vacation.
Oh, no. My family's in Florida, and I'm in New York.
Little Kevin ends up checking into New York's Plaza Hotel, pretending he's waiting for his father. Naturally, he has a ball with the hotel staff, including bellman Rob Schneider.
Is everything all right, sir? Is the temperature in the room okay?
It's okay.
Do you know how the TV works?
I'm 10 years old. TV's my life.
Out on the streets, as in the first film, he meets a threatening stranger who turns out to be a nice person after all. In this case, a pigeon lady, played by Brenda Fricker, the Oscar winner as the mother in My Left Foot. They have a nice scene together.
Do you know that it's been a couple of years since I've talked to anybody?
Then the burglars, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern, show up, like the coyote in the Roadrunner cartoons, to take their licks from Kevin. I gave a marginal thumbs down to the original Home Alone. I really don't like those burglars. This time I appreciated Macaulay Culkin more. He has a special gift. He is positively charming. But this time, too, I felt the burglar scenes were even more annoying. Again, marginal thumbs down for me on Home Alone 2. And I know that every 10-year-old kid in America is going to hate me for it.
Well, I won't hate you for it, Gene, because my thumb is not even marginally down, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I didn't even go for the Brenda Fricker scenes because I thought that they went on way too long, were overwritten and treacly and sentimental and shameless in the way that the little twerp kind of lectures her on the meaning of life and the meaning of truth, and she's so grateful to find out these words of wisdom from his angelic little mouth. And then as far as the burglars are concerned, the violence, which is obviously, you're quite right, modeled on all those cartoons with the Roadrunner and Wile E. Coyote. They use the wide-angle lens to make it seem that things are really coming from a long way down and slamming on top of everyone, is really tough stuff. You know, usually live-action versions of cartoons don't work because when flesh and blood is involved, it's not that funny.
I do think that this kid is a big talent.
Oh, I think Macaulay Culkin, I'm not criticizing Macaulay Culkin, the actor. I'm criticizing the character, Kevin, who a little bit of Kevin goes a long way. I mean, the entire scene in that townhouse when he's dropping 50-pound bags of cement on them and tricking them into sticking their heads into exploding toilets and so forth. I mean, this stuff, it may even sound funny when I describe it, but the fact is eventually
it wears you out.
It's real old and exhausting.
It wore me out, too. And that, of course, is Walter Matthau as Mr. Wilson being tormented by young Mason Gamble in Dennis the Menace, the new film from writer-producer John Hughes. And this is sort of a hit-and-miss affair, with most of the hits coming from Walter Matthau in a terrific comic performance as the long-suffering neighbor, Mr. Wilson. Here's an example of his relationship with Dennis in one of the cute scenes in the movie.
I use it all the time.
I bet I know what it is.
I doubt that.
I bet it's your address.
Even better than the humor are the all-too-few tender moments between Mr. Wilson and Dennis.
You know, Mr. Wilson, you know why I'm not crying? If I'm not going to be around my mom and dad, the only other person I want to be around is you.
But there's a story to tell. Unfortunately, it's about Dennis being held hostage by a thief played by Christopher Lloyd, who has stolen Mr. Wilson's gold coins.
Put a cork in it. You're giving me a headache.
I don't have a cork.
Shut your mouth.
A little of that goes a long way. Still, I came close to giving this movie, which is directed by Nick Castle, a thumbs up, but I decided against it because I really got bored with the thief. There are lots of dull hijinks with him, even duller pratfalls than those with the thieves in another recent John Hughes production, Home Alone 2. I don't know why we needed the thief in the first place. I wish the story could have centered more on Dennis and Mr. Wilson, because theirs is the one and only relationship in the film that works. When Matthau is not on the screen, Dennis the Menace is dull indeed.
You're right, and you're right about the character played by Christopher Lloyd.
Wow.
Now, his name is Switchblade Sam.
Yeah.
And he is an apparently homeless person, very dirty, very menacing, very angry, very violent, and always displaying his switchblade and tying up little boys. And I know that it's supposed to be comedic and innocent, but images like that disturb me, and I think they will also disturb the young children. And this is a movie that's always going to appeal to really young children.
That's correct.
And they're going to be disturbed by that. And you know what?
They're going to think that every homeless person on the street has a knife.
Or that they might be waiting outside their bedroom window.
Yes.
Why did the people who made this movie feel that they had to go back to screenwriting 101, it was John Hughes who wrote the screenplay, and introduce a villain in order that you can have the formula by the numbers plot? Why not have the effort to write a relationship between Dennis and Mr. Wilson and then play it out?
If they had them having to work together on a project, Dennis and Mr. Wilson, where the kid is constantly foiling him, and so that they become enemies. They're so good together.
They have a common goal, but they can't get there because Dennis screws everything up. Instead of this ridiculous, cliched, unnecessary villain.
And the time that it takes. There's 10 extra minutes there. If you're going to even throw it in, shorten it. Baby's Day Out is your kids, little kids, next best choice.
Well, this is fascinating, Gene, because you've just defended this film on exactly the same grounds that I used for The Shadow. You like the art direction, you like the look, you like the old-fashioned feel,
things.
You like the tone. Well, I hated this movie more than any other movie on this show, and I'm really surprised at you. You should be ashamed of yourself.
What,
first of all,
for not agreeing with you? I've never been ashamed of that. I've been proud of that.
Okay, well, in that case, here's another star for your lapel.
Okay.
This movie is not funny. It's way too long. The burglars, who are recycled right out of Home Alone, are really awkwardly written, awkwardly played, and they're not funny at all. And the fact, of course, this whole movie is obviously inspired by Baby Herman, the sequence at the beginning of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's funny in a cartoon because it's not real. If you think that a real baby crawling through traffic and crawling out on it, look, you're already smiling. You think that's funny. I didn't think it was funny.
I thought it was an absolute perfect child's eye view of the fantasies that they might have. And little kids, this is where I think you're off by a lot, little kids will really have their hearts in their throats as they watch this thing, and will be tickled, and will be absolutely tickled by the way the baby survives and the bad guys are foiled.
I don't think it's a movie that's appropriate for little kids. I can remember when I was 3.5 years old, I went to see a movie where Mickey Rooney was standing on a ledge outside a window. It was a comedy. Everybody was laughing. I was terrified. I think a little child who sees this baby about to fall off of tall buildings and be crushed by big cars isn't going to know what's funny.
Oh, you know, I better go back and find out who attended that sneak preview. I saw all those children are in dear jeopardy of becoming
We attended
Roger Ebert.
the same screening, and those kids were not with that movie.
We didn't attend it. I saw it in Michigan City, Indiana, last Saturday, so you're wrong.
Totally different audience. A department store executive spots a potential Santa Claus and hires him on the spot in that scene from Miracle on 34th Street, a new version of the 1947 classic. And if you've seen the original, you won't find many surprises in this remake, which is good-hearted, however, on its own terms. The movie stars Richard Attenborough as Kris Kringle, who becomes the most popular department store Santa in town. But the woman who hired him, played by Elizabeth Perkins, doesn't believe in Santa and has taught her 6-year-old daughter, played by Mara Wilson, to think the same way. The little girl is wise beyond her years, as a neighbor finds out at Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Under the circumstances, the little girl isn't too thrilled by the prospect of a chat with Santa Claus.
I know how this all works.
But soon something begins to change, and the 6-year-old begins to suspect that maybe there might be more to life, after all, than her mother's stark realism.
Would it be okay if I thought about this more? Do I have to not believe in Santa Claus right away?
Meanwhile, old Kris Kringle is tricked by evil employees of a rival department store and ends up institutionalized because he insists he really is Santa Claus. Just like in the original film, it all comes down to a court hearing between faith and cynicism.
Well, I would greatly like to oblige Mr. Collins, but I cannot make this reindeer fly.
I didn't think so.
He only flies on Christmas Eve.
I like this movie for its sweet, unhurried tone. It pays tribute to the 1947 film rather than trying to recycle it into some kind of flashy, slick modernism. Nothing will ever replace the original classic with its Oscar-winning performance by Edmund Gwenn as Santa Claus. But by realizing that, the makers of this new Miracle on 34th Street have been able to share some of the same spirit in a holiday film that I think has a lot of quiet charm.
Well, I want to focus on the word quiet. I think we like the same thing here. This is a very respectful film of the other film and of the holiday and of the characters in it. It's very well cast. The writing is clean as can be. The scenes play elemental. It's classically made, and I think that's why we like it. Even though I will tell you that the ending that they came up with, which is different from the classic ending of the first film, doesn't work at all, in my opinion.
Well, oddly enough, Gene, you may be referring to a wedding scene. And since I was married in the same church
I'm not.
where that wedding scene takes place, it kind of touched my heart.
I knew you were. In fact, when I took my daughter there, and she was a flower girl in the same, I pointed it out to her, too.
Okay.
Not at all. I'm talking about in the courtroom. And that switch doesn't work at all.
Okay,
but otherwise,
you like the letters, the bags of mail that came in. Okay.
And I was skeptical of this remake of 101 Dalmatians. The animated original was so charming, and this time the dogs wouldn't talk. How could it possibly work? Well, it does very well, I think, thanks to 3 terrific human performances and a sometimes smart script by John Hughes. Here's the film at its most charming as 2 Dalmatian owners, played by Jeff Daniels and Jolie Richardson, have fallen in love just like their dog. But there's a problem, and her name is Cruella DeVille, played enthusiastically as a fur-loving fashion designer by Glenn Close. Jolie Richardson works for her. Cruella soon has designs on the couple's puppies.
£7,500. Yeah? £2 per spot.
Well, what would you do with 15 puppies?
Yeah, but that's irrelevant. It is. You can't have any because they're not for sale.
I'm getting very tired of you, Roland.
Roger.
Whatever.
After Cruella's henchmen kidnap the puppies, the dogs escape and hide out on a farm in the film's one overlong and I thought boring section, even when Cruella gets her comeuppance.
Give it to me!
So the surprise for me is that the humans were just as entertaining, more so than the puppies in this live-action version. Jolie Richardson is absolutely charming, and Glenn Close is quite powerful and a lot of fun as Cruella. Was there a need for this picture? No. Is it entertaining? Yes. Therefore, a recommendation for me on 101 Dalmatians.
I get a marginal thumbs down, Gene, even though I did like Glenn Close. I'll tell you, one of the things you put your finger on, I think you're quite right, that whole scene at the farm with the humor of pain and cruelty as horrible things happen to the puppies and to those two crooks who John Hughes has recycled directly out of the Home Alone movies. And in those movies, when they were getting the same kinds of characters, getting bricks thrown on them and so forth, it wasn't funny. It's not funny here either. Stick to the characters and don't go for this painful physical comedy.
Well, that's one section, but Roger, what about the lovers? I mean, they were, you know, the opening this film and making him a video game designer rather than a songwriter.
Well, so
that
what?
was no. It was cute and it was visually interesting. I mean, I like them a lot. You didn't like them? You didn't like Jolie Richardson?
I did, but you know, the problem is I felt that the dogs got upstaged by the humans.
Yes.
This is really a movie about dogs, and I think the animated film works so much better that I just can't put this one up there by comparison.
Well, again, looking at it by itself, I liked it.
Absent-minded Professor Robin Williams and his sidekick Weebo are delighted there by his latest invention, green goo that's flying rubber, or Flubber. And maybe Flubber will save Williams' bankrupt university, not to mention his engagement in this retread of the early 60s comedies that starred Fred MacMurray. What I kept thinking was, forget the Flubber, though, and patent Weebo, which is a levitating personal digital assistant with a seductive voice by Jodie Benson.
Professor, it's gone.
Marcia Gay Harden plays his long-suffering fiancé, who is fed up even when he claims Flubber will save the university.
This is the reason I didn't make it last night.
Flubber has a lot of applications, including the ability to turn every basketball player into Air Jordan.
That's pretty good.
Sorry, but Flubber just never took off for me. Instead of finding really funny applications for the amazing substance, the movie just thinks up goofy ways for it to bounce around the room and make people bounce around the room. And then there's an unfunny subplot involving a couple of hired goons who creep around like clones from Home Alone. No surprise there, since this movie was written by John Hughes of Home Alone. What's intriguing in the movie is the way little Weebo is in love with the professor and considers the real woman to be her rival, but that's never really explored.
And probably ought to be explored in another movie in terms of...
Son of Weebo or
well, no, I mean a personal computer getting involved with the owner of it, or something like that.
That'd be fun.
There could be a story there. We give these away for free, don't we? It's really nice.
Yeah.
But this movie bored me to death.
I know.
I mean, first of all, to make the basketball game so boring as the payoff, I mean, I have seen not that long ago the original
the dog playing basketball was better. Remember the movie where the dog
I'm just saying,
basketball?
I'm talking about the actual. I'm talking about the actual Flubber movie, and they did the same stuff basically. Robin Williams seems tired in this picture. He doesn't seem to be getting any joy out of it. The film seemed to be also shot dark, and I don't think it was the way it was projected when we saw it. It just felt down and depressing, and then has things bouncing. It's not enough for me to recommend. And our next film is Home Alone 3. Boy, has this franchise ever run out of gas. Even the star, Macaulay Culkin, is gone. But if his cute little self were in this picture, it wouldn't have made any difference. Home Alone 3 is a stupid slapstick piece of juvenilia as a suburban Chicago kid is home alone, defending himself against constant attack by 4 thugs trying to recover a stolen Air Force computer chip that has mistakenly wound up in his possession. The crooks suffer more blows to the head than a bad heavyweight fighter.
Stand clear.
And that goes on and on to the point of nausea. If this movie had a theme song, it would be Dumbbells Keep Falling on My Head. The story makes no sense. I feel for every family that's going to be suckered into seeing Home Alone 3.
Now, this is going to astound you, but I'm giving the movie thumbs up.
It does astound me. Are you okay?
Better than you were the day that you liked Starship Troopers.
Okay. Oh, no.
I'll tell you why I like the movie.
Exciting.
This movie empowers little kids. This is the one where they finally got it right. I liked it better than the other two.
Than the original Home Alone?
Little kids love the idea that they can somehow affect the outcome, that they can have power over grown-ups, that they can defend themselves and be smart and think about things.
He hammers
and
thugs
in this
in the
movie,
first
it's
one.
not as violent as the second one. The kid is charming. He really is a good little actor. And the plot is smarter than the other
We completely
movies.
disagree. I thought the kid was generic mop top, and I thought that the Home Alone...
come on, that kid?
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah, there are only two kids.
He's very good.
Culkin's better. And the other thing is, it's the same plot as the first one, only more bumps to the head.
The second, they're all the same plot.
But you just said that this one empowers him more than the other one. Absolutely not true.
That's the secret of that's why kids love these movies, because they love the fantasy that they have power.
But it's overdone. Overkill here.
Not for
Overkill.
Not
for you.
Okay.